Welcome to Craziest HOA Moments. Here is how the HOA tried it. Carol Wright was blocking the path to my dock, her phone aimed at my face like a weapon. "You are trespassing on community property," she shouted, her voice sharp enough to scatter the ducks. "I need you to leave immediately or I am calling the police." I stood there in my seafoam green jacket, fishing rod in one hand, keys to my house in the other, trying to process what she had just said. "This is my pond," I said, keeping my voice level. "It is on my deed." She shook her head, clipboard clutched against her cherry red blazer. "That pond is a community asset," she snapped. "The Vista Verde Owners Association has jurisdiction over all water features in this neighborhood. You do not get to fence off nature." I felt my stomach drop. I had moved to Columbus, Ohio 6 months earlier because I wanted a small piece of nature near my house, and the private pond had been the selling point. Now this woman, the neighborhood watch liaison, was telling me I did not own it. I work in IT support, and my next paycheck was already spoken for. The down payment on this house had wiped out my savings. I could not afford surprise fines or legal fees. Carol stepped closer, her phone still recording. "I have documentation from the board," she said. "This water feature was always intended as a shared amenity. You are in violation of pond safety rules, and if you do not comply, we will hold a compliance hearing." I looked past her at the dock I had repaired 2 weeks ago, the kayak I had chained to the post, the no trespassing sign I had installed at the trailhead. My title report had been crystal clear. The pond and the land around it were part of my lot. But Carol was not interested in my paperwork. She wanted control, and she had the HOA behind her. The trouble had started 3 days earlier. I had been walking the trail that looped around the pond when my neighbor, a guy named Tom, stopped me. "Hey," he said, lowering his voice. "Just so you know, Carol is telling people the pond is now community property. She says the developer always meant it to be shared." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. "The pond is on my deed," I said. "She can say whatever she wants, but it does not change the title." Tom shrugged, looking uncomfortable. "I am just letting you know. She has been talking to the board, and they are backing her up." That night, I pulled out my closing documents and reread every page. The legal description was unambiguous. The pond, the dock, and the surrounding buffer zone were all part of my lot. There was no easement, no shared access clause, nothing that gave the HOA any claim. I emailed the property manager, a woman named Lisa, asking for clarification. She responded within an hour. "Officially, I cannot comment," she wrote. "Unofficially, you might want to get your title report certified and keep it handy. Carol is on a mission, and she does not back down easily." The next morning, I found a laminated sign zip-tied to the trailhead gate. "Pond safety rules," it read in bold letters. "No private use without HOA approval. No structures without board review. Violators subject to fines and removal." I stared at it, my pulse climbing. Carol had installed it overnight, and she had done it on my property. I pulled out my phone and took pictures, then called Lisa again. She sighed when I explained. "That is harassment framed as an inspection," she said quietly. "You need to document everything. The board will always enforce the standards, but Carol has a habit of enforcing rules that do not exist." I asked her what she meant. She paused. "Let me just say that Carol has been warned before about overstepping. But she has friends on the board, and they protect her. Your best move is to get an attorney involved before this escalates further." I ripped the sign down and brought it inside. That afternoon, I requested a certified title report from the county. It cost me $80 I could not spare, but I needed proof I could not explain away. While I waited for the report, Carol ramped up her campaign. She started posting in the neighborhood Facebook group, claiming the pond was a shared amenity that one resident was trying to monopolize. She did not name me directly, but everyone knew who she meant. Other neighbors chimed in, some supporting her, others questioning her authority. One woman, a new board member named Janet, asked Carol to provide documentation. Carol responded with a vague reference to developer intent and historical use. When Janet pressed for specifics, Carol pivoted to safety concerns. We cannot allow one person to control access to a water feature without proper oversight, she wrote. It is a liability issue. The certified title report arrived 4 days later. It was even clearer than my closing documents. The pond was entirely within my lot boundaries, with no encumbrances, no easements, and no shared use provisions. I scanned every page and saved the file. That evening, Carol showed up at my door with 2 other HOA board members. She introduced them as Mike and Sandra, and she did not wait for an invitation before launching into her pitch. "We need to discuss your cooperation with pond access," she said, her tone falsely pleasant. "The board has decided to formalize a shared use agreement for the water feature, and we need your signature." I asked to see the agreement. She handed me a single page that granted the HOA full authority to regulate access, impose safety rules, and collect fees for maintenance. In exchange, I would be allowed to use the pond as long as I followed their guidelines. I read it twice, then handed it back. "This is my pond," I said. "I am not signing anything." Carol's smile vanished. "You are being unreasonable," she snapped. "That pond is a community asset, and you do not have the right to exclude your neighbors." I pulled out my phone and opened the scanned title report. I forwarded it to all 3 of them right there on my porch. "Check your email," I said. "That is a certified county title report. The pond is mine, and it has been mine since closing. If you want to dispute that, take it up with a judge." Carol glanced at her phone, her face flushing. "This does not prove anything," she said. "The developer's original plat had provisions for shared amenities." "I do not care what the plat said," I replied. "The deed supersedes everything, and the deed is clear." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a hiss. "The board will always enforce the standards," she said. "You can hide behind your paperwork all you want, but we will find a way to make you comply." Mike and Sandra looked uncomfortable, but neither of them said a word. They left a minute later, Carol muttering threats under her breath as she walked back to her car. The next day, a group of HOA members showed up at the pond like it was a park. They brought lawn chairs, fishing rods, and a cooler. Carol stood at the trailhead directing traffic and smiling like she had won. I watched from my kitchen window, my hands shaking with anger. I called Lisa, the property manager. "She is staging a protest," I said. "She brought half the neighborhood to my pond to prove a point." Lisa groaned. "That is Carol's signature move," she said. "She did the same thing 2 years ago with a community garden dispute." "You need to call the police and report trespassing. Do not engage directly. She will try to bait you into doing something she can use against you." I hung up and dialed the non-emergency line. The dispatcher took my information and said an officer would be out within the hour. I grabbed my title report and waited. The officer arrived 30 minutes later. I met him at the trailhead and showed him the title report, the deed, and the survey map. He looked over the documents, then walked down to the pond where Carol was holding court. I stayed back, watching as he spoke to her. She gestured wildly, her voice rising, but I could not hear the words. After a few minutes, the officer returned. "She says the HOA has shared use rights based on developer intent," he told me. "But your deed is pretty clear. Legally, this is your property, and they are trespassing. Do you want me to ask them to leave?" I nodded. He walked back and spoke to the group. Carol argued for another minute, then threw up her hands and stormed off. The others followed, packing up their chairs and muttering complaints. As they left, Carol turned and pointed at me. "This is not over," she shouted. "The board will always enforce the standards, and we will take this as far as we need to." That night, I got an email from the HOA board. It was a formal notice of a compliance hearing scheduled for the following week. The email listed multiple alleged violations, including unauthorized structures, refusal to cooperate with safety inspections, and interference with community enjoyment. I forwarded it to Lisa, who responded immediately. "Get an attorney," she wrote. "This is retaliation, and they are setting you up for fines." I spent the next 2 days calling lawyers. Most of them wanted retainers I could not afford, but I finally found one who agreed to write a demand letter for a flat fee. His name was Greg, and he listened to my story without interrupting. "This is textbook HOA overreach," he said when I finished. "They are trying to manufacture jurisdiction where none exists. I am going to send them a letter threatening action for trespass and harassment. That should get their attention." The letter went out the next day, and I forwarded a copy to every board member and their HOA attorney. The compliance hearing was scheduled as a Zoom meeting. I logged in 5 minutes early, my attorney letter ready to share on screen. Carol was already there, along with Mike, Sandra, and 2 other board members I did not recognize. The HOA attorney, a bored-looking man named Dave, joined last. Carol started the meeting by reading the list of alleged violations. She spoke in a clipped, rehearsed tone as if she were presenting evidence at a trial. Then she paused and looked directly at the camera. "The board has reviewed the matter," she said, "and we have determined that the pond in question falls under HOA jurisdiction based on the original development plan. We are prepared to move forward with enforcement unless the homeowner agrees to a shared use arrangement." I unmuted myself. "I would like to share my screen," I said. Dave nodded, and I pulled up the county title report. I walked them through every page, highlighting the legal description, the lot boundaries, and the absence of any easements or shared use clauses. Then I opened the survey map and zoomed in on the pond. "As you can see," I said, "the entire water feature is within my lot. There is no ambiguity here." If you are enjoying this story, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real HOA drama. Dave, the HOA attorney, cleared his throat. "Can you send me that title report?" he asked quietly. "I have not seen this documentation before." I sent it in the chat, and I watched as he opened the file. His expression shifted from boredom to concern. He muted himself and leaned off screen, clearly talking to someone else. When he came back, he looked at Carol. "Where did you get the information about developer intent?" he asked. Carol's face went tight. "It was in the original meeting notes from the first board," she said. "The developer told us the pond would be shared." Dave shook his head. "That does not override a recorded deed," he said. "If the title report is accurate, and it looks like it is, the HOA has no claim to this property. We need to drop this matter immediately." Carol exploded. "That pond is a community asset," she shouted. "We cannot just let him fence off nature and exclude everyone." Dave cut her off. "Carol, this is not a debate," he said firmly. "The deed is controlling. If we pursue this further, we expose the association to liability. I am advising the board to withdraw the violations and issue a formal apology." Mike and Sandra both nodded, looking relieved. One of the other board members, a quiet guy named Paul, unmuted himself. "I move that we withdraw the violations and send a letter of apology," he said. Sandra seconded it, and the vote passed 4-1. Carol was the only dissent, her face red with fury. She tried to argue, but Dave muted her and moved on to the next agenda item. I stayed on the call long enough to hear Paul suggest that Carol be removed from the Neighborhood Watch liaison role pending a review of her conduct. The motion passed unanimously, with Carol abstaining. When the meeting ended, I sat back in my chair, my hands still shaking. I had won, but I knew Carol was not going to let it go quietly. The next morning, Carol called the police anyway. She claimed I was trespassing on HOA common area and interfering with community access. The officer who responded was the same one from before. He recognized me immediately and asked if I had the title report handy. I showed it to him again, and he shook his head. "Ma'am," he said to Carol, "this is private property. You are the one trespassing if you are on his land without permission." She tried to argue, claiming the board had not officially voted to drop the matter, but the officer was not interested. He told her to leave and warned her that if she called again with the same complaint, she could be cited for filing a false report. She left without another word, but I could see the rage in her eyes. Over the next week, Carol tried to rally support on the neighborhood Facebook group. She posted long rants about greedy homeowners and the erosion of community values. A few neighbors chimed in to support her, but most stayed silent. One woman, a new resident named Kate, started copying Carol's posts and adding her own commentary, trying to stir the pot. She claimed I was setting a dangerous precedent and that other homeowners would start fencing off trails and parks. I ignored her, but Lisa reached out privately. Kate is Carol's protege, she wrote. She is trying to keep the fight alive because Carol is losing credibility. Just keep documenting everything and stay out of it. Let them burn themselves out. The final showdown came 2 weeks later at the neighborhood trailhead by the water. Carol had organized a meeting to discuss pond access, and she invited the entire neighborhood. I showed up with printed copies of the attorney letter, the title report, and the board meeting minutes where the violations were withdrawn. About 20 people were there, most of them curious rather than hostile. Carol stood at the front, her cherry red blazer bright against the trees, her lanyard with HOA keys hanging around her neck like a badge of authority. She started by framing the issue as a community rights matter, claiming I was trying to privatize a shared resource. I let her talk for 5 minutes, then I raised my hand. "Can I respond?" I asked. She looked annoyed but nodded. I walked to the front and handed out the printed documents. "This is the certified title report," I said, holding up the first page. "It shows that the pond is entirely on my lot. This is the attorney letter threatening action for trespass. And this is the board meeting minutes where the HOA attorney advised the board to drop the matter because they have no legal claim." I paused and looked around. "Carol has been telling you that the pond is a community asset, but she has never provided any documentation to support that claim." "The reason is simple. There is no documentation. The developer never transferred the pond to the HOA. It was sold to me as part of my lot, and it is mine." Several neighbors started reading the documents. One of them, an older man named Bill, looked up at Carol. "Is this true?" he asked. "Did you know the deed was clear?" Carol's face flushed. "The deed does not tell the whole story," she said. "The developer's intent was always to share the pond." Bill shook his head. "Intent does not matter if it is not in the deed," he said. "You have been harassing this guy for no reason." The meeting fell apart after that. People started arguing, some defending Carol, others calling her out for wasting everyone's time. Paul, the board member who had moved to remove Carol from her liaison role, stood up and announced that the board had voted to accept her resignation from the committee. Carol tried to protest, but Paul cut her off. "You crossed every line, Carol," he said. "You called the police on a homeowner for using his own property. You organized harassment visits. You posted fake rules on his land. The board has received multiple complaints about your conduct, and we are not going to tolerate it anymore. You are done." Carol grabbed her things and stormed off, shouting about betrayal and corruption. A few of her supporters followed, but most of the neighbors stayed behind, apologizing to me and asking questions about the title process. Lisa called me that night. "I heard about the meeting," she said. "Carol is officially out, and the board is going to send you a formal letter confirming that the pond is your property and that the HOA has no claim. You won." I thanked her, but I did not feel like celebrating. The fight had drained me, financially and emotionally. My next paycheck was already spoken for, and I had spent money I did not have on attorney fees and certified documents. But I still had the pond and I still had the deed, and Carol no longer had the power to threaten me. A week later, I was back at the dock, fishing in the early morning light. The water was calm, the air cool, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The neighborhood was quiet, the trails empty, and the pond was mine. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.